Inspect the deck and taper surfaces carefully for cracks or wash cuts. If you find any damage that requires repair, notify your supervisor. After preparing the pump taper, use a solvent to thoroughly clean the protective coating of rust-preventative material from the taper of the new valve seat. Then, dry the seat taper with a clean cloth and inspect it carefully to ensure that no nicks or burrs have occurred in shipment. Immediately after cleaning the seat taper, carefully place the valve seat in the pump taper and push it down firmly with your hand. If all is in order, the valve seat should stick in the taper, making contact all the way around. Now, take an old valve without an insert and place it in the new seat. Pound the valve and seat down with a sledge on a steel bar. The sound will change to a solid ring when the seat is properly set in the deck. Then, remove the old valve from the seat. At this point in the procedure, it is extremely important to remove the temporary cloth dam installed earlier to keep fluid out of the taper. Failure to remove the cloth could cause serious damage to the pump and possible injury to you or your fellow workers. Before installing the new valve, check the clearances in the upper valve stem guide. These guides wear with age, and if they do not fit snugly, replace them. Now, install the new valve in the new valve seat. Always install a new valve spring with a new valve, and make sure it is the proper one specified by the valve manufacturer. Thoroughly clean the threads on the valve plug and the matching threads in the pump. Then, lubricate them and the gasket with a general purpose grease or any other grease specified by the manufacturer. Finally, reinstall the valve plug and the valve cap and tighten as recommended by the manufacturer. This completes the procedure for multiplex L-head type pumps. Now, let's examine the correct procedure for replacing fluid end parts in multiplex pumps that have over and under valves and a liner which loads from the power end. The first step is to remove the retainer nut and suction cover. Then, disconnect the piston rod from the pony rod by unscrewing it, or by removing the clamp, depending on how the unit is equipped. Normally, the two rods can be separated by turning the pump over very slowly. This will push the piston rod to its full forward position and leave a space between them when the pony rod retracts. Never use a chisel or a screwdriver to pry the two rods apart, because this will mar the smooth surfaces, which could cause misalignment between the piston and liner. Now remove the piston rod and piston from the liner by pushing it out through the fluid end. Next, unbolt the liner retention ring and remove it from the pump. Dislodge the liner by jarring on it with a timber. Then, remove the liner. After removing the liner from the power end, thoroughly wash out the pump to remove any remaining mud, as explained before. To prepare and install the new liner in this over and under pump, follow the same procedure previously described for the L-head pump, except for the method of tightening the new liner against the cylinder face. This pump has a liner retention ring instead of a clamp. To reinstall this ring, Tighten the ring bolts in a crisscross pattern, being careful to bring them up evenly. To install the new piston in this over and under pump, first make up the piston, following the same procedure previously described. Then thoroughly lubricate the liner bore and the piston with a general purpose grease. Insert the piston rod through the pump cylinder from the fluid end and center the piston carefully in the end of the liner. This requires a second person to support the rod at the power end. Using a rod removal and installation tool, push the piston into the liner until the piston rod touches the pony rod. If the tool is not available, you can push it with a piece of timber. Connect the piston rod to the pony rod as specified by the pump manufacturer and previously described for the L head pump. If the piston rod connects to the pony rod with a clamp, make sure the rod joint face is clean and free of nicks or burrs before connecting the rods. Also, clean out the alignment hole and inspect the pin for burrs. Make sure the pin will fit snugly into the alignment hole. The bolts on clamp-type connections should be tightened evenly. If a threaded connection is used, be sure the alignment pin and shoulder will make up flat and square with the pony rod. The force a man can exert on a 24-inch wrench is sufficient to attach a threaded type piston rod to a threaded pony rod. Replacing suction valve seats in the over and under pump requires a somewhat different procedure from that previously described for L head pumps, because the suction valve is positioned below the discharge valve. After removing the upper and lower valves, use this special adapter, which makes it possible to pull the lower valve seat by working through the upper valve seat opening. The device has a stem extension rod small enough in diameter to slip through the spaces between the cross arms of the upper seat. To use this adapter device, first reach through the cylinder opening and install the J-tool in the lower valve seat. Make certain the J-hooks engage the cross arms of the valve seat. Then, screw the lower adapter plate onto the substem so that the recessed side of the holes will face the J-tool. Then, reach into the cylinder and screw this assembly into the top of the J-tool. Screw the substem into the J-tool until the hooks are secure against the cross arms of the valve seat. And screw the lower adapter plate as high as it will go on the substem without passing the last thread. Now, place the upper adapter plate with stem extensions attached on the upper valve seat. The stem extensions will extend downward between the cross arms. Make sure the bottom ends of the stem extensions enter the matching holes in the lower adapter plate as far as they will go. Turn the lower adapter plate counterclockwise to lock the stem extensions to the lower adapter plate. By hand, screw the main stem through the upper adapter plate, turning it as tight as possible against the cross arms of the upper valve seat. This pulls the stem extensions up tight against the lower adapter plate. Now install the hydraulic jack assembly on the main stem. And dislodge the lower valve seat in the manner previously described. Next, install the new valve seat and valve, following the same procedure shown for the L head pump. To prepare the cylinder head for reinstallation, clean it thoroughly, making sure no foreign matter is left on the threads. Lightly lubricate the cylinder head threads and packing area with a general purpose grease. Always use a new packing. Finally, reinstall the cylinder head on the pump and tighten it to the manufacturer's specifications. This completes the procedure for this type of pump. Next, let's observe the procedure for replacing the fluid end parts in multiplex over and under type pumps that load from the fluid end and have an external liner retention ring. After removing the cylinder head, remove the piston rod and piston through the fluid end following the same procedure previously described. Loosen the liner lock body until the two liner lock rings can be removed from the liner. To dislodge the liner, hold a piece of timber as a spacer between the pony rod and the end of the liner while someone turns the pump by hand. As the pump thrusts forward, the timber will push the liner toward the fluid end of the pump cylinder. After removing the liner from the pump, remember to immediately wash out the pump cylinder to remove any remaining mud before it has a chance to dry. Prepare the interior surfaces of the pump cylinder and the new liner by coating them with a general purpose grease. It should be noted that this pump has two different types of liners and packing, and the installation procedure is different for each type. The Type 1 liner has about a 1-inch shoulder in front of the liner packing groove. On Type 2, the liner groove is right at the front of the liner, and the shoulder is behind the liner packing groove. On Type 2 liners, the packing is installed on the liner before it is put into the pump cylinder. On Type 1 liners, the packing is not put on the liner. Instead, it is coated with a general purpose grease and is installed separately in the pump cylinder before the liner is put in. As previously described, install the prepared new liner by pushing it through the cylinder head opening. This requires the assistance of another person who stands in the pump cradle and guides the end of the liner into proper position while it is being pushed from the front end. Once the liner is in place, reinstall the cleaned and lubricated liner retention assembly and tighten it to the manufacturer's specifications. Prepare the new piston and install it from the fluid end of the pump, following the same procedure already described. Also remove and replace valves and valve seats in this pump by the same procedure described previously for other over and under pumps. Finally, clean, lubricate, and reinstall the cylinder head as previously described. Before putting a mud pump back into operation, make sure the supercharger is in proper working condition. Also, check the suction pulsation dampener. Make sure it is charged to the manufacturer's recommendation. If this dampener is not properly charged, the centrifugal pump that serves as the supercharger could experience excessive wear of packing and shaft. At the same time, check the discharge pulsation dampener. This dampener should also be charged to the manufacturer's specification using only nitrogen. Some of the scenes in this presentation were photographed at TRW Mission's unique test facility in Houston, which is equipped with a 1,300 horsepower triplex pump, plus everything else needed to duplicate any field operating condition. TRW Mission is the only manufacturer of pump parts that regularly carries on extensive testing of its own products and the products of competitors as